You know how, as a new parent, every quiet moment feels like gold? That night was one of those rare, peaceful moments. The house was still, the kind of stillness that almost feels heavy, like the air itself is taking a deep breath. Our son had finally fallen asleep upstairs, tucked into his crib, and my wife and I were sprawled out on the couch, too exhausted to even talk much. We had the baby monitor on the coffee table, just in case. The soft hum of static from it had become like background music in our lives, a steady reassurance that all was well. I remember thinking how safe everything felt. The warm glow from the lamp, the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint creak of the house settling. My wife was reading a book, flipping pages slowly, and I was just staring at the muted TV, barely paying attention. There was nothing unusual, nothing to hint at what was about to happen. If anything, it was the most ordinary night in the world. And maybe that's why I remember it so vividly, because that perfect calm was the last moment I'd feel truly at ease in my own home. It started so subtly, I almost didn't notice at first. Just a faint shift in the static, like when a radio catches a stray signal. I glanced at the baby monitor, expecting the usual, maybe the rustle of blankets if our son had stirred. But then, buried under that soft white noise, came something different. A sound that didn't belong. It was faint, almost like a whisper. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. I leaned closer, holding my breath, trying to catch it again. And then I heard it, clear enough to make my stomach knot. Someone said my name. Not loud, not urgent, just soft, almost careful. My eyes flicked toward my wife, half expecting her to be looking at me with the same confused expression I felt on my own face. But she didn't even glance up from her book. She hadn't heard it. For a few seconds I sat frozen, staring at the tiny speaker on the monitor like it might explain itself. The static settled again, smooth and constant, but the sound of that whisper clung to me. It wasn't just the fact that someone had said my name, it was the way it felt like they knew me. The next time it came through, I realized why it felt so wrong. The voice, it sounded like my wife. Not exactly, but close enough that my brain instantly tried to connect the dots. Same soft tone, same unhurried pace she uses when she's trying to soothe our son. For a moment, that made me feel almost relieved, like maybe she'd just gone upstairs without me noticing. But there was something in the way it carried through the monitor that made my skin crawl. It was too slow, like someone imitating her but dragging the words out just a little too long. There was no warmth in it, no natural rise and fall, just a calm, deliberate whisper. I kept staring at the monitor, almost expecting the camera light to flicker or show movement, but the screen stayed still, just the empty crib and the faint nightlight glow. The longer I listened, the more that familiar yet not voice dug under my skin. It was the kind of wrongness you can't explain, but you feel it deep in your gut. And in that moment, the thought I didn't want to admit began to form. If that wasn't my wife upstairs, then who, or what, was talking to my son? I turned my head slowly, almost afraid of what I'd see. And there she was, my wife, still curled up at the far end of the couch, the lamplight catching the edge of her hair as she flipped another page in her book. She hadn't moved. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't even looked up. My mouth went dry, my mind scrambling for any explanation that made sense. I asked her, in a low voice, if she'd just gone upstairs. She frowned, shaking her head without glancing away from the page. I must have been staring at her for longer than I realized, because she finally put the book down and gave me that look, the one that says, "You're starting to weird me out." But I couldn't shake it. That voice on the monitor had been her, and yet it hadn't. I glanced back at the baby monitor, almost expecting the voice to return, but it was nothing but static again. Still, my heart was pounding. It's a strange kind of fear when something you love, something familiar, becomes the thing you can't trust. And in that moment, sitting next to my wife, I felt more alone than if I'd been in that dark nursery myself. I forced a laugh, the kind you give when you're trying to convince yourself you're overreacting. I told her it was probably just interference. Baby monitors pick up all kinds of random signals, right? Maybe a neighbor's cordless phone, maybe a taxi dispatcher, maybe anything that wasn't what I thought it was. She seemed satisfied with that answer, and for a few minutes, I tried to be, too. I reached over, switched the monitor to a different channel, and adjusted the volume until the static was softer, less intrusive. The warm hum of the living room crept back in, the quiet buzz from the lamp, the slow tick of the wall clock, the muted sound from the TV. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. I told myself I'd been hearing things, that I was just tired. My wife went back to her book, and I stared at the monitor like it was a harmless little box again, nothing more. But there was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake, a tiny, restless knot just under my ribs. I didn't know it then, but that uneasy calm, the false sense of safety, was exactly what would make what happened next so much worse. It didn't take long for that fragile sense of normal to shatter. Maybe 10 minutes passed before the static shifted again, like a faint wind brushing against the microphone. I froze, my eyes locked on the monitor. At first, there was nothing, just that quiet hiss. But then, slipping through it, came the voice again. This time it was clearer, sharper. "It's okay, come closer." The words were drawn out, almost coaxing, like someone trying to lure a nervous animal. My wife looked up at me, her face pale. She'd heard it too. I grabbed the monitor, holding it close to my ear, and that's when I heard another sound layered underneath, soft rustling, like fabric brushing against something, or the slow, deliberate shuffle of footsteps on carpet. My chest tightened. The nursery door had been closed when I'd last checked, and our son couldn't even stand yet, let alone walk. I set the monitor down and stood up without thinking, every muscle in my body urging me upstairs. My wife whispered my name, but I barely heard her. All I could think about was getting to that room before, whatever it was, got any closer to my son. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my pulse thudding so hard it felt like it was echoing in my ears. The nursery door loomed at the end of the hall, that pale strip of light from the night lamp spilling out from underneath. I hesitated for just a moment before pushing it open. The room was exactly as it should be. The crib sat in its corner, bathed in the soft orange glow from the nightlight. Our son lay there, his tiny chest rising and falling in a slow, peaceful rhythm. Not a sound. No movement beyond the gentle sway of the curtains from the open window across the room. I stepped inside, scanning every corner. The closet door was shut, the rocking chair still, the baby monitor's camera perched in its usual spot. My eyes kept darting back to the crib, almost expecting him to suddenly sit up, or for something else to be standing there. But there was nothing. I leaned over the crib just to be sure, brushing my fingers lightly over his blanket. Warm. Safe. Completely unaware of the voice we'd heard. And yet the stillness felt wrong somehow, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. I eased the nursery door shut, careful not to let the latch click, and made my way back downstairs. My wife was sitting exactly where I'd left her, but she was watching me now, her book closed in her lap. "Why did you run up there like that?" she asked quietly, like she already knew the answer but didn't want to hear it out loud. I told her about the voice, how it had said those words, how I'd heard footsteps in the room. I expected her to laugh it off the way I had earlier, or maybe scold me for scaring her. Instead, she just stared at me for a moment before looking down at her hands. And then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I've heard it too." The air seemed to tighten between us. She explained that a few nights ago, while I was working late in the garage, she'd heard the monitor pick up what sounded like her own voice, humming to the baby. But she hadn't been upstairs. She didn't tell me then because she didn't want me to think she was imagining things. Hearing her say that sent a cold weight through me. This wasn't a one-time glitch. Over the next few nights, it stopped feeling like a coincidence, and started feeling like a presence. The voice didn't just slip through the monitor anymore, it lingered, like it knew we were listening. Sometimes it would hum, soft and tuneless, for long stretches of time. Other times, it would speak in that slow, deliberate way, drawing out syllables like it was savoring them. And then, one night, it said our son's name. Not once, but over and over. The first time, I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, that maybe I'd misheard. But then it repeated, each time a little clearer, a little more certain. My wife and I sat frozen, staring at the monitor's tiny speaker like it was something alive. There was no mistaking it now. Whoever, or whatever, was speaking wasn't random. It knew who was in that room. It knew us. And sometimes, in between the words, we'd hear it, a soft, low chuckle. Not loud enough to feel overt, but just enough to make the hair on the back of my neck prickle. It was playing with us, and every night it seemed to get a little braver, a little closer. I reached the point where I needed to know for sure, proof that this wasn't just sleeplessness twisting my brain. One night, before we went to bed, I set up my phone to record the baby monitor's audio and video feed. I propped it up right in front of the tiny screen, hit record, and left it running until morning. Neither of us slept much that night. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the wind outside made me want to get up and check the nursery again. When dawn finally came, I grabbed my phone and scrubbed through the footage, fast-forwarding past hours of harmless static. And then I found it. Around 2:14 a.m., the voice came through, clear as day. My wife's voice, or something wearing her voice, whispering our son's name like a lullaby. But there was something else. As it spoke, I heard it, soft, steady breathing, so close to the microphone it made the static swell and pulse. Breathing that wasn't the baby's. I froze, staring at the faint, shadowy outline in the crib's corner on the grainy video feed. It was gone in a blink, like it knew I was watching. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew it wasn't human. It happened only 2 nights later. I was half asleep on the couch when the monitor crackled to life, pulling me instantly awake. At first it was the usual static, the kind I'd grown used to, but then the voice came, softer than before, almost like it was whispering just for me. "I'm in here with him." My stomach dropped. I didn't think. I didn't call to my wife. I just ran. The stairs blurred beneath my feet as I took them 3 at a time, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might split my chest. I shoved the nursery door open so fast it hit the wall. The crib was right where it always was, and my son was awake, sitting up, his tiny hands gripping the bars. He wasn't crying. He wasn't scared. He was smiling, staring into the far corner of the room. I followed his gaze, but the corner was empty, or at least it looked empty. The air felt heavier in there, colder, like I'd walked into a room that hadn't been opened in years. My son giggled softly, still looking at whatever I couldn't see. I took a step toward him, and for the first time, I wished I hadn't. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in the nursery, rocking slowly in the chair, the monitor cradled in my lap like it might offer me answers if I held it long enough. It didn't. By morning, my wife came in to take the baby, and I finally looked down at the back of the monitor. That's when I saw them, deep, jagged scratches gouged into the plastic casing. For long marks, as if something had gripped it hard enough to almost break through. They hadn't been there before. My stomach turned. I didn't want it in the house another second. That afternoon, I threw it in the trash outside, telling myself that would be the end of it. That night, for the first time in weeks, the house felt calm again. We went to bed early, and I started to believe maybe it had all been tied to that device. But sometime after midnight, I woke to the sound of a whisper, clear, steady, and much too close. "It's okay, come closer." It wasn't coming from a monitor. It wasn't coming from anywhere I could see. It was coming from the baby's room, and this time, there was nothing between it and us.